Welcome to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk.
Hey everyone, it's Jenny Lisk, and this is episode 92 of the Widowed Parent Podcast. So I had such a great discussion with KJ Dell'Antonia for this episode, and KJ is the former editor of the New York Times Motherlode blog, and she's the author of a book called How to Be a Happier Parent. And I thought, what a terrific title, and what an important topic, and particularly for those of us who are widowed parents. I think that some of this more general parenting topics, this is one of those, it's not grief specific, but it's more about parenting in general. And I think that, we are still parents, and now we are in our family's case, the only parent who's still alive at this point. So it's all on us. So I figured that the more tips and insights and advice and so forth and so on parenting that we can learn about, the better. So I'm very glad that KJ was kind enough to come on the show today and talk with us. We talked all about why she wanted to write the book, the research that she did. She talked to lots of different people, some of her favorite mantras for parenting. We talked about lots of different topics. In the book, she goes chapter by chapter on different areas that can be pain points in families, whether it's chores or family mealtime or sibling relationships or the overload of activities and things on our schedules. Although right now during the pandemic, we obviously have less things on our schedules, but the book was written before we knew about the pandemic. So anyway, we just had a terrific discussion, and I couldn't let her get away without asking her at the end about her brand new book, a novel, which just is out this week. It's called The Chicken Sisters. And so you'll hear me ask her about that. And I thought it sounded like a really fun book and a nice break, something to read that would be enjoyable and not nonfiction information dense book, but something a little more in the fun category. So I ordered it for myself as a Christmas present. So anyway, I asked KJ about her book, The Chicken Sisters, in the end as well. Oh, and I forgot to say that it turns out that one of the protagonists in the story is actually a widowed parent of teenagers. So it's not a book about widowed parenting, but one of the characters is a widowed parent. So I hope you enjoy my discussion with KJ Dell'Antonia. Support for this podcast comes from BetterHelp. You can talk with a licensed professional therapist online, anytime, anywhere. Visit betterhelp.com/widowedparent to learn more and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/widowedparent. I hope you'll check it out. My guest today is KJ Dell'Antonia. KJ is the former editor of the New York Times Motherlode blog and current contributor to the New York Times, and is the author of How to Be a Happier Parent. She lives with her family on a small farm in Lyme, New Hampshire. KJ, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, well, I've really been looking forward to speaking with you today. And, so your book is How to Be a Happier Parent. So, and this is one of these episodes, it's not going to be grief specific. It's more parenting specific. And one of the things I hear from listeners a lot is, we may be widowed parents. We're still parents. And now we're the only parent, and it's all on us. Yeah, even if we have terrific help from family, friends, other people, at the end of the day, we're the one living parent. So, how to be a happier one?
Everyone who is parenting would like to be happier as they are doing it. I think no matter how happy you are, and also no matter what other circumstances you're in. As I interviewed parents for the book, and I interviewed a lot of them, there are men and women in there who suffer from a chronic illness, who are widowed, who have a child with a significant disability, who are struggling on the financial or the job front. And who knows where they are now, because this is a couple of years ago. But I really tried to keep it, inclusive for all, because it's not like, well, I'm sorry, but now you're dealing with your chronic illness, so you're not worried about your parenting. That is so not the way it works, right? Now you're dealing with your cancer. Your kids will just sit over here and wait, probably twiddling their thumbs politely and asking you if you need things. No, that's not how it is. So, yeah, I really wanted to speak to all of us in all of the places that we can be when we still have young children or teenagers who still need things from us. And, we need to sort of be ourselves and find ourselves within that.
Yeah. Okay. So why did you write it? How did you get this idea to write this book?
So I was the editor of the New York Times Motherlode blog for many, many, many years. And the lead writer. So that involved doing a lot of writing myself, but also editing like every single thing that you saw in that space. And a lot of people read it pretty religiously. I edited, that was all me. And you saw, I don't know, 1-2% of what I saw in terms of people submitting and working with people and looking at ideas. And the the really big consistent thing that I kept seeing as I read, a lot of it was personal essays. I read a lot of personal essays, was that they all skewed towards being unhappy, towards being angsty, towards being angry, towards being overwhelmed. There was this huge burden that we were all feeling in this role that most of us sought out. I mean, very few of us had our children, dropped on our doorstep by a stork that we didn't at least call, right? The world doesn't present you with this role. You want it. You really want these kids and this family thing. And then people were just finding it really hard. And I was finding it really hard. I mean, when I had that Motherlode job, it was a full-time gig. And I had 4 kids I think they were 12 and under when I started and 16 and under when I stopped, 17, and something like that. So me and my partner were continually, every day was get up, put your skates on, go, drive this kid here, drive that kid here, help this kid with that, throw this kid, at that, eat, clean, whatever. And at the end of the day, we just sort of sink into the bed and then argue with each other about whose day sucked more. It was crazy. And I didn't want to feel that way. And I didn't quite get why we all seemed to feel that way. So wanted to write about that. That is part of the answer. And then there's a secondary piece, which is that some of the burden on all of us as parents involves our societal and cultural choices. And, any single or only parent at this moment who's got kids at home because the schools are closed is feeling that even more than you ever have, that we are a society set up, designed for a world in which there is a parent out in the workforce and a parent at home who is supported financially by the parent out in the workforce. And far less than 50% of us are in that role right now. Anyway, so that's another piece of it. I didn't write that book. That book's out there. It's great. Anne-Marie Slaughter wrote one of those books. Bridget Schulte wrote one. I didn't feel like I could do better. So I didn't write the book about how the world is screwing you, because it is. But I wrote the book about, okay, these are the cards that we've been dealt, without saying it is your fault for, not feeling happy, even though you have no support and no access to childcare and no, it's not your fault, but you are stuck with it. So What can we do about it?
So how are we going to be happier in the meantime?
Yeah. I hope that those things will change. I work for those things to change. It's not going to help me.
Right. Your kids are going to be out of the house.
My kids are already teenagers. They'll be out of the house before we have, a meaningful national childcare policy, and certainly maternity leave is off the table for me. Thank you. Please, I don't want to need that again.
All right. So as you're working on the research, the writing, you were also applying these lessons in your own life.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, and spoiler alert, you tell us right in the beginning, you ended up happier.
I did.
Yeah, which is terrific. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is that you said that some of that comes from doing things differently. So we can talk about some maybe specific tips or strategies in a minute. But some of what shifted wasn't maybe so much what you did, but how you thought about it. Can you tell us
Yes.
about that?
Well, so an interesting piece of that whole thing I was saying earlier about how all the essays were about, being angry and being overwhelmed and being overworked and being burdened. That became the stylish way to think about family somewhere in about, 2004. And, the whole bring mommy a drink, parents are jerks, or kids are jerks. That's jerk not being the word that they use in that meme. All of that sort of, this is really hard and it sucks. But we're just soldiering through, but, bring us some, martini and we'll feel better. That whole way of looking at it, that's optional, actually. It really is. Sometimes things suck. And, as a widowed parent and your audience is going to know that more than most of us. Sometimes things really, really outright suck. Sometimes you've just hung up on your cancer diagnosis, which is an experience that I have had. Sometimes you've lost a partner. Sometimes you've lost a parent. Sometimes you've lost a child. But most of the time, you're just kind of, you're going along with your usual, I'm waving my arms in sort of a plateaued. Most of the time we're going about our usual business, having an ordinary day. And your listeners will know better than most, again, when suddenly your day is not ordinary anymore, you really just want that ordinary back, right?
Yeah.
And so figuring out how to appreciate that ordinary while you're in it is huge. So a lot of the research that I did involved talking to, psychologists and neuroscientists about how our brains deal with whether or not, with our emotions, like whether or not we're feeling happy at any, or even feeling content, or even feeling gratitude, or feeling any positive emotions as opposed to negative emotions. And taking some of what they suggested and applying it to those ordinarily frustrating moments, I found really helpful.
Yeah. Okay. And you came up with some mantras, right? Can you tell us about a few of your favorites?
My favorite mantra. Well, it changes. It changes by the moment. But one of my favorites is that you can be happy when your children aren't.
That's a good one.
People get really upset by that. People are like, well, no. You're only supposed to be as happy as your happiest child, or as your at least happy child, right? And I'm like, no, nope. Because your kids are gonna, your kids have the experiences that they have, right? They lose their favorite toy. They get a balloon for 10 minutes and then they accidentally let it go and the darn thing is just gone forever. They don't get into the first grade classroom with their best friend. They don't make the top soccer team. They don't get into the college that they wanted to get into. And you will feel empathy for those things. You will feel bad for your child, but that doesn't mean that you can't be broadly and generally content with the life that you and then those kids are living, and the roof over your head and all the food and all the other great Western things that we have. But even more than that, it's really, I get on these like little hobby horses, but when our kids have an experience that is really upsetting for them, and what they see is that it is also really upsetting for us when it shouldn't be, like say they don't make the top soccer team, and they come home and you are beside yourself because your kid is the best and they should and you're so upset for them. And really, this is not fair because you can see like the cutoff was just right here. And Lil Joanne from down the street, you and her kid are like, your kid and hers, they're like right on a par. They're the same soccer player basically. And she made the top team. So clearly they could take just one more kid. And it could be your kid, right? So if you just made some calls, I mean, we all, even if you swear you're not going down that road, we all go down that road for something. Maybe it's violin. Maybe it's whether they get to go to the state spelling bee. I don't know what it'll be, but I have done it. We all do it. And meanwhile, your kid is going, I thought it was just a soccer team. Like, really? This is that big a deal? So part of them is like, whoa, I guess I should feel really crushed and upset. I mean, I do feel really crushed and upset, but if part of me was kind of ready to get on with this and have some Oreos, but oh man. So that's part of it. The other piece of it is wow, when I didn't make that top soccer team, Mom just about lost her squash. Next time something like that happens, maybe I shouldn't tell her. Or maybe I shouldn't try out, because that's a big deal to not make it. So maybe I should just let that go. So we are really, it's weird. It's funny because when we take on that burden of sort of carrying our kids' massive emotion, we are also dumping our massive emotions on them.
And
interesting. They do not need or want that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we need to maintain some sort of okayness in the face of our kids' disappointments and frustrations. It's really important for them.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things you point out in the book, which I thought was a helpful way to think about it, is like, it's not my homework that was left on the table. It's not my hockey skates that were left in the closet.
Nope. You will probably have a perfectly good day, even though, your child left their science project at home.
Right.
If you let yourself. You can spend the whole day feeling really bad about it too.
Well,
or you can spend the whole day chasing after them, or you can spend the whole day berating yourself for either chasing after them or not chasing after them. That is another mantra, basically. Decide what to do it, and then get on with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. So if your child leaves the homework on the table and you do decide to take it to them, because sometimes you do. Sometimes your kid has had the worst possible year, right? And you're just going to take them the homework because they don't need another thing. And that is fine. So just do it and don't kick yourself because somebody's book says don't do that. On the other hand, sometimes you reminded the kid 14 times before they left. And now, even though you're about to walk right by that school, darn it, you are not taking them that homework. Again, just, decide, do it, and then roll with it. If you made the right call, great. If you made the wrong call, you'll get a chance to do it again tomorrow. And truly, you'll never, ever know anyway.
True. Good point. All right. Well, let's look at a few other areas then, I think, where, they can often cause unhappiness I don't know if cause is the right word, but anyway, where unhappiness often pops up in families. And let's start with family meals. I guess my first question is, why are family meals important?
Oh, family meals are the core of the amount of time that you spend with your kids a lot, especially once they get over the age of 5. Once a family is composed of a parent, whether they're in or out of the house working, and kids who are in schools and school and activities. And of course, here we all are not doing any of these things at the moment, but, accept them. Once you're in that space, they've done these really fascinating studies of actual family members moving around the rooms in their house. And the time that the family members spend, all of them in the same room, is so concentrated on the kitchen and meals that it's like the numbers are extraordinary. That's the time you spend with your kids. So it really does not matter what you're eating or how you're eating it, or whether you're standing up, or whether, you're having breakfast. None of that makes any difference. The point is this is it. Like, that is the core of family life, is that time eating, even if, as it is for some of us, it's, here's the pot of taco meat and here's the shells, and the parents are going to hang out in the kitchen all evening, and the kids are going to cycle through and make their own tacos as they, deal with various sports practices or play practices or homework or whatever. And we all get to that point eventually. So I don't want to add to the pressure to have a perfect sit down family dinner every night. It's not that. It's just making the most of that time together, having meals and being in that space.
Okay, so what are some of the things that can go wrong then? Because I think when you reached out to people, a lot of people identified some pain points, right?
Yeah. Meals are a huge pain point, because here you are, you're the parent, you have to earn the money, buy the food, make the food become food that can be eaten, as opposed to, get the food to the place where the children will eat it, especially if they're small. When they get to be teenagers, they can help with this, but we're thinking about small. Get the food off, clean up after the food, and then do it all again 6 hours later if you're doing yes.
The planning is what kills me every time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's a lot of work involved in this. I mean, there are, if you were Angelina Jolie, you would have a full-time person dedicated to doing this for your family, right? And they would you would pay them a full-time salary, and this is all they would do is the meals and the snacks and the healthy food and the who likes this and the who likes that. That could be, but it is sadly there's no one out there who's going to pay you a full-time salary for doing it for your own family. So so it's huge. It's a huge amount of work, and recognizing that and then figuring out which things are not a big deal for you and which things are huge for you, and then trying to minimize the not a big deal or minimize the huge problems, and then, put more of your time into the things that are not a big deal is key, so that you can find a way to have that, hour and a half of the meal experience, whether that's cooking and eating it together, or cooking and then cleaning up, finding a way to make that a sort of a pleasant space, not a place where you're yelling at people to eat things that they don't want, not a place where you're yelling at them to clean up afterwards, and yet not a place where you are cooking things that no one is eating and then cleaning it all up yourself too. And it's hard. It's hard to work this out, and it takes forever, and it changes constantly, but that is okay, because that's kind of part of the deal. Like, this is a process that evolves. This is the time you get with your kids, and it's going to change over time, but they're going to look back on this sort of huge amount of hours of family eating together, and they're going to remember things about it.
Yeah. Okay. And you came up with some rules for family dinner for your family. And I think some of them, actually, I think you even have a video on your website where you talk about a few of them. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, these were so important my kids are teenagers now. And in part because we had these rules, and in part because they're teenagers, they pretty much just, come to the table and eat the food, or, it's different when you have teenagers. But when they were little, I had a lot of rules around rules. They are rules. I had rules around how I wanted them to be during dinner. So here I was the primary cook, and I would take people's, needs and thoughts into account. But when I cooked food, I put it on the table. Everyone came. The rules were you had to come to the table. You had to take the food on your plate, and you're not allowed to say anything mean to the cook, because the cook got really upset. The cook could be extremely emotional, volatile at this stage of everyone's existence, especially when everybody was under the age of 10. So but you don't have to eat it. You don't have to like it. You don't have to taste it. And if there is dessert, you still get it. So that was the deal in our house. The food was the food. You ate what you wanted. People might say to you, and frequently it was your siblings, no, actually, those Brussels sprouts are really good. You'd probably like them. And 10, 12, 15 times into having Brussels sprouts, the kid who had been reluctant would try them. But nobody was going to say you can't leave the table till you try a Brussels sprout. Nobody was going to say, there was none of that. If you literally ate, if you came to every single meal and ate nothing but bread and butter for a month, I probably wouldn't even notice. Because there were a lot of them. And also because that's not my job, was to put the food, to make the healthy food and to provide a variety and to try to have something on the table that everybody liked. And often that was bread and butter. And, they were eating fine. The pediatrician who told me not to look at a day's meal, or even especially not a single meal, but to look at a week or even a month, that was a great gift.
Yeah. Well, and so I think you're outlining an important point about boundaries, really, right? Like your side of the line is you procure and prepare and provide and put it out, make it available. And their side of the line is putting it in their bodies.
Yes, or not putting it in their bodies, but being polite while they choose not to do so.
Right. I should have said making the choice about what to put in their bodies.
Yeah. So there was, they were allowed to say, and this is really funny because they will still look up and go, this is not my favorite. Because that's basically, you could say, I don't care for this, or this is not my favorite, or no, thank you. That's
right.
that was really it. If you said ew, you were out. Like there was no second chance for an ew. You know, or not, or if you complained about the food that I had gone to the trouble of cooking, you were out of there so fast your head would spin. And it did happen. Of course, it happened to every kid. And did they basically get sent to bed without supper? Sometimes.
They probably learned pretty fast. Yeah. Well, and I loved how you said
they came back and I was like, okay, you can eat your meal, you know, after the rest of us have eaten, and it'll be cold and it'll be what it'll be. And that makes me sound like some, you know, Miss Harrigan at the orphanage or something, but it only would happen, you know, once or twice, and they were getting plenty of food. You know?
Yeah.
You gotta learn that, right? Why should they not treat you with the same respect that you would hope that they would treat a friend's parent if they're invited to a friend's house for dinner when we can do those things again
someday?
Someday. So first of all, you know, you want to know that they will do that, and secondly, you need that same respect. You are working very, very hard to feed these people that live in your house, who want dinner every single night without fail in the most frustratingly consistent manner.
Right. I know. Sometimes I think about that, right? Didn't we just eat yesterday?
Just fed you. Like, you know, what's for dinner? I don't know. What did we have yesterday? Just lean back on that. Like, you know, especially now. Oh my gosh. It is truly an overwhelming job to have everybody home and eating.
Yeah. Well, and right now, you know, if your kids are old enough to self-serve breakfast and lunch, that makes it easier. But people with small kids right now, I mean, you might not have ever had to serve lunch because they were getting that at school. Right.
And now it must feel like all you ever do is cut up fruit. Like, like, you know, that's how it feels in the summer, right? Like that's just, I know I don't eat, I would go through whole summers with never eat fruit myself because like, oh my God, I can't look at any more fruit. Cutting fruit for children for ages. No, it's a lot. I can't. Yeah, it's a lot having everybody home all the time.
Okay, so the next topic then, and because your book, you organize kind of by topics. Each chapter is a different topic, and you get strategies and research and comments from people that are in the trenches. And so I wanted to ask about discipline, because I think that's a word, everybody knows the word discipline, right? But what does that mean, or how should we be thinking about that?
Well, people hate that word. It was funny because I had made a list of pain points that I wanted to put in the book, you know, meals and homework and siblings and computer time. And then I did this piece of research working with someone at Fordham University. We put together, it's basically a survey, but because we had certain controls on it and certain academic standards that we met, it qualifies as research. But and in there was an open-ended question. What makes you most unhappy as a parent? And, you know, we expected you could say anything. It was just a blank, right? So many people had an answer that included either the word discipline or the idea of discipline that we went back and read the entire previous amount of the survey to figure out if we had cued that in some way. Like, did we use the word discipline 27 times or something? And we hadn't. It's just that was what people said. Making them follow the rules, discipline, enforcing the rules, punishing them when they do something wrong, that kind of like that. There was this really massively consistent howl of dismay over the idea of discipline. And so I kind of had to set out and research that one cold because I hadn't thought about it as such. To me, it was kind of integral. It's integrated in all the rest of the stuff, right? Something, you know, if you have to send your child away from the table from complaining, that's discipline. If you're splitting up siblings because they're fighting, that's discipline. I hadn't thought of it as its own thing. So I reached out into the world of experts, as you know, as we journalists do, and came up with some really great thoughts around not seeing it as making them follow the rules or enforcing the family rules or punishing people when they don't follow rules, but rather seeing discipline as like a huge iceberg of you teaching your kids how to behave out in the world when they're with you and when they're not with you, teaching them to be responsible adults. That's the huge iceberg. The part where you punish them because they have screwed something up in a way that really requires a consequence is like the tip of the iceberg. It's like the teeny weeny bit that's sticking up out of the water. And it's when you think about it that way, it's a little less daunting to try to figure out, well, okay, when the kid did screw up, what should I do? And then the other piece of advice that I got, which I really appreciated, was not to think of that screw up as a really bad thing, but rather to look at it as an opportunity. So, and that sounds a little crazy, and it also sounds pretty Pollyanna, but hear me out. If your kid is going to spend all night playing his Nintendo Switch instead of studying for his math test, and then you're going to discover it the next day, either when you find them under the covers with the Nintendo Switch or when they failed the math test or whatever, and they tell you that's what happened, you really want that to happen in 7th grade, not when they're a freshman in college. Right? Yeah. Similarly, if they're going to screw up and blow, every cent of money that they have on some stupid, frivolous thing, you want that to be candy at age 8, not, at age 25, I don't know, Gucci purses. I have no idea. You want them to you need to be giving them the framework of expected behavior and then the opportunity to screw up. If your kids are never doing things that make you feel like you need to punish them, they may not be getting enough opportunities to screw up. Honestly, that's a little weird, but you want them to screw up while you're around to help them out of it. Yeah. And while it doesn't mean as much.
And the stakes are lower.
Yeah. You want this, you don't want anybody in your family to drive under the influence of anything. But if they're, you don't ever want that. But honestly, if it's going to happen, you want it to happen while you can help them deal with the consequences. Not while, not when they're out in the world on their own and maybe not even going to reach out to you. That's not the best example, but maybe it happens though. That's a really, and that's what one, so I talked to a parent who had sort of a firm belief that their child didn't go to parties where there was alcohol or drugs or anything like that. And then discovered that the kid had gone to one. And it was at a point when the kid was 6 months away from going to college when the cops raided this party and caught, X number of kids at the given high school. So here's the parent who's thought that they have conveyed this, from the parent perspective, they're thinking, I thought we had taught you better than that. Clearly we didn't. This is awful. You are a mess. And I am about to send you to college where probably you will do nothing except go to parties where there's, because I have screwed up and we did not teach it. So, the parent was just like, how do we, we have 6 months. What do we do? Do we make her take a gap year? Do we, how do we claw this back? And, the answer, to the extent there is one, involved a lot of very honest discussion between the parent and the kid about what the parent had thought and, what the kid had been doing. And it required the parent to say, look, you've made me feel like I can't pay for you to go to college next year. You need to convince me that this is not how you're going to spend your college time. And so, what are you going to do to convince me that this is not who you are? Because I don't think that, I don't think it's who you want to be. And in this case, I can imagine cases in which that wouldn't work, but in this scenario, with this family, I think it was very effective because it's not who the kid really was. And I think for a lot of us, that's not who our kids don't want to disappoint us. They don't want, they don't want to make all the dumb mistakes they'd make. They don't want to spend $300 on in-app purchases because, and by the way, you can roll those back with almost everybody that in-app purchases because yes, that's happened in our family. they don't want you to feel terrible and to feel angry. So showing them that you are angry and let down not because the kid is bad, but because this is just not how your family is and how you thought that your child would behave under these circumstances, that has real meaning for a kid. So that's the discipline, is teaching your child that you expect them to have self-discipline.
Yeah.
It's a very big tangly web, though.
Yeah. There are two things that jumped out at me when I was reading your book here, which I would hold up if we were on video, but we're not. So
you don't need to.
But one of them, let's see, said discipline isn't just meant to create a happier, more harmonious family life or to engage a child's help with the work of the household. It's intended to teach the child how to be an adult in the world. And this was the funny part, where we will not be able to retrieve a stapler from a colleague by hitting her over the head with even the lightest of plastic desk toys.
Sometimes, occasionally that works, but by and large, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's such an important point. And, I was thinking in the beginning, we talked about parents shifting our thinking on some of these things and how that has a piece in this too. And you talked about how instead of thinking, I've asked him 100 times to do this and he still doesn't do it, parents who are happier in their disciplinary role think something more like, I've asked him 100 times and I'll ask him 100 more, and that's how we'll get there.
Yeah, that sort of switches us into the idea of chores and kids helping out around the house or just hanging up their towels. And the super freeing thing that I learned, and I learned this from parents who had older kids when I was writing this book. I learned two super freeing things from older parents who felt fine about the fact that basically they were asking their kids to hang up their towels every single time. And so what one parent said to me was, look, you got two things going on here when you've got a chore or just a cleanliness expectation of your kid. First of all, you want them to hang up the towel. Secondly, you would like them to hang up the towel without being reminded, merrily and cheerfully with a smile on their face as they contribute to the workings of the household and behave in a responsible way and leave the bathroom clean for everyone else. Throw that second one just out the window. They were like, those are two totally separate things, and your job is to focus on the first one. It is their job to hang up that towel. That's it. Doesn't matter how many times you have to say it. Doesn't matter if you have to pick up the wet towel and whip it around their head while they're playing Nintendo. That's their job to hang up the towel. That's, and that's your whole entire focus. And then somebody else said, yeah, my kid did absolutely finally learn to empty the dishwasher without being asked when she came home from college. And I was like, okay, great. Something to look forward to. And that was super helpful because my kids they each have a routine job that they are expected to do every night. And that was another very helpful thing, was to give people a job for long enough to turn it into a habit. That's kind of a different question. And let's see. One of them, so there are four of them, but one's been at college, so it doesn't really count. But really, basically, one of them manages to do their daily job without being reminded. And they're all the same. They've been raised in the same way. The jobs are substantially the same. In fact, the jobs switch around. So sometimes, it's just, they're just different kids. Similarly, I have one child who will put their dishes in the dishwasher every single time. They just will. That child does that. The other children don't. I don't know why. And that child has its faults, My goodness, that child has its faults. But it's just weird. So letting go of the idea that if you have to tell the kid every single time to clear the cereal bowl means you've failed as a parent, that's going to make you happier. Because you haven't. They're just like that. Wouldn't you just leave the cereal bowl if you could?
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's helpful. It's something you mentioned about having chores and having them for long periods of time. I saw it in the book. Somebody was recommending having an assignment for a year.
I know. Isn't that crazy? I never thought of that until I reached out And it was like, okay, who feels like they've got a handle on chores, like, in the world and in that survey that we did, because otherwise they end up with me just talking to people who live on the East Coast and, are just exactly like me. So didn't do that. But, who feels like they've got a handle on chores? And I reached out to a bunch of people. And one thing I found consistently is that the least amount of time that people who felt like, if people felt like their kids were helping around the house, like they're like, no, it's all fine. Like we got that. We got other issues. Or, gosh, don't ask me about sibling fights or whatever. But because that's important to remember. Nobody's got it all down. Anyway, the least amount of time any of them had a kid do the same chore, I think was a month. It might have been a week, because the point was the kid can't learn to do it right. And they won't, like, if it's different every day, then it doesn't become a habit. It doesn't become like, oh, it's time to feed the dogs. Instead, it's like, I don't know what my job is today. Somebody will probably tell me, or maybe if I'm lucky, they'll do it for me. And so we used to have like a spinning chore wheel. And so that was the worst, because it wasn't even like it's Monday, I have to feed the dogs. It was like every fourth day I have to feed the dogs, and every fourth day I have to do the dishes, and I couldn't figure out why it didn't work. And I mean, it worked, but you just had to make the kid do it. So if your goal is to get them to do it without being asked, it has to be like a job that sticks with them for a long time. And it also is super helpful if you let them have some say in which job is there. So if you're in a family with a lot of kids, as like we are, to basically, once they got to be like, the youngest was like 10, I started to just throw them, here's the list. Like, here are the 8 things that need to be done every week. Y'all figure out who's going to do which ones when. And they ended up with this sort of rotational seasonal thing. And they often, I think they've had the same jobs now for like 3 seasons, because they like doing, one doesn't mind emptying the dishwasher. One doesn't mind feeding the dogs. But if it were me, I'd be like, well, that's not fair. But they're fine with it.
Well, okay, so that actually is a great segue, because you have a chapter on siblings, and in it you said you'll be a happier parent if you can tattoo in your brain, fair doesn't always mean equal. Tell us about that one.
Oh, that's so hard. It feels like, if I bought 3 Christmas presents for one child, every child should get 3 Christmas presents, but Christmas presents can cost different amounts, or more relevantly, they can mean different things to different kids. So, they don't have to be exactly the same. And that's not the best example, but similarly, they don't all have to, get an equal amount of your attention, or just because one child got to learn to mow the lawn when they were 10 doesn't mean that the next 10-year-old is able to learn to mow the lawn by themselves. Assuming that is desirable. Kids vary, right? You might have one that you start teaching to drive when they're 15 and a half, which is when you can learn to drive in our state. And you might have another that you don't do that until they're 16 and a half, because just they're not ready, right? And that's okay. One of the experts that I spoke to was like, no, if you're making the same decisions for every child in your household, then that's probably wrong. Like, you're almost, because there's almost no chance that every child in your household has the same needs at the same ages or the same stages. It's just, that's not right. I mean, if you've got a 2-year-old and a 15-year-old, do they get the same number of cookies? They do not.
And yet kids often throw things back in your face, right? That's not fair. That's not fair.
Right. He got to do this when he, Sam got to go and sleep over at so-and-so's house when they were such and such an age. Why can't I? And because it's different. Because you're different. Because that friend is different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes, because I said so is such a terrible fallback thing, and you should, and it is reasonable to give a better explanation, but sometimes that is what it is, Yes, your sister got to go on a sleepover tonight and you didn't get to go on a sleepover tonight. And that's because the sister's sleepover parents were able to come and get her, and yours require that I take her. And, your brother has the car and I don't have any way to get you there.
Yeah.
Sorry. Is that fair? It just is.
It is. Yeah. 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 Good. Well, this has been so terrific. I can't let you go without asking about your new book. It's called The Chicken Sisters. Tell us all about that.
Oh my gosh, thank you. So yeah, I've become a novelist. I have a novel out, or as we speak, it's not quite out, but it'll be out very, very quickly. It is called The Chicken Sisters. It's the story of two sisters in small town Kansas, one who decides to stay in the small town, the other one decides to leave. They have an ongoing battle over who made the right life choice there, and some secret jealousies over each other's lives. One of them is struggling with being a widowed parent of teenagers and feeling very stuck with her choice to stay in the small town. The other one is struggling with having sort of headed off to New York and created a big career for herself in organizing and become a social media personality, and not finding, and she's losing touch with the family that she does have. So they're both sort of unhappy in their different ways, and then they come together when I gotta get better at describing this. They come together because the sister who stayed reaches out to a reality TV show and says, "Will you you want to judge these two fried chicken restaurants that are in our town? One of which she grew up running with her mother, so the sisters and the mother, and then she married into the other." Man, it's really convoluted. She marries into the other chicken frying family, and there's a long-standing family rivalry. She's not even allowed to go into her old family chicken restaurant because nobody who belongs to family A is allowed to go in the other family's chicken restaurant, and it's this big deal. So anyway, reality TV competition is going to sail in and solve it all for them, because we all know that works.
And they all live happily ever after, right?
Maybe, but not because of the reality TV competition.
Yes. Well, so, and by the time this airs, actually, your book will just be out, brand new out. So I encourage people to go and take a look at that. I actually have to tell you, I just ordered it for myself as a Christmas present for myself, because that's what you do when you're a widowed parent. You buy yourself presents. And I thought, this would be a fun book to just like kick back and take a break and just enjoy something that's not like something I have to do.
Yeah, that's what it's meant to be. It's definitely in the vein of, fun fiction that is, somebody called it the comfort food of novels, which I loved. It's just a very, I don't know, I wrote it, so it's always difficult, but they're relatable people with interesting problems doing really obnoxious things to each other in the name of winning a reality TV competition. Who wouldn't enjoy that?
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to reading it. And congratulations, by the way, first novel.
Thank you. Yes.
Very exciting. A shift from the nonfiction parenting writing into this. So, terrific.
And it's all about family, and it's all about trying to figure out what makes you happy in life.
Yeah. And one of the protagonists is a widowed parent. So there you go. Yep. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, we're reaching the end of our time today. I'd love to keep talking to you about books and writing all day long, which actually, by the way, I forgot to mention that you have a podcast yourself, and it's about writing. It's called #AmWriting with Jess and KJ. Just tell us what's the podcast about.
It's actually just plain #AmWriting now, because we added another co-host. So there's me, former columnist and editor at the New York Times, and now novelist. There's Serena Bowen, the brilliant best-selling romance novelist of more than 35 books at this point. And there's Jess Leahy, who is pretty much a strictly nonfiction on her second book about parenting and family, heavily researched style of writing. And the three of us come together and we talk about technique, and we talk craft, and we talk business, or we interview other people at various stages of their career with an eye towards providing actionable, useful, fun advice for writers in all genres.
Yes, I've learned so much by listening to your show for, I don't know how long now, at least a year, maybe longer. I don't know. I lose track of time, but it's been fun. And well, let me ask you briefly, just for fun, you guys always end by talking about what you're reading right now. Can you tell us what you're reading?
Okay, so what I'm reading, like actively reading, even as not as we speak, but what I'm having a hard time putting down to go to bed at night is called Plain Bad Heroines. It is like You thought my book description was intricate. This one's crazy. So there's a murder, or not a murder. There's a terrible death that takes place at a boarding school. It's circa 1900, and now these people are going to make a movie about it. And but they're also going to make sort of a secondary movie about the haunting of the making of the movie, about the death that occurred in 1900, which also was probably involved in a haunting. It's horror. It's queer. It's gargantuan thick. I mean, it must be 1,000 pages. It's just like twisty, turny, fascinating, fun, and all the characters are interesting, and I'm really enjoying it. So that's what I am reading. And then my other recommendation, because I can't not give two, is The Other Bennett Sister. If you are a Jane Austen fan, and in particular a Pride and Prejudice fan, I just loved this. This is as close as we can get to Jane Austen coming back and going, I really cheated Mary Bennet. I really wasn't fair to her. Let's hear why she was who she was, and then what happened to her next. So the first third of the book is kind of the Pride and Prejudice story, but that's happening in the background to Mary's life. So even every so often it'll pop into a scene that it's almost like there's this wall and Pride and Prejudice is on the stage and Mary's back here and you're back there with her. And every so often you pop out into the actual novel of Pride and Prejudice and Mary says some of the obnoxious things that she says as a character in that book. But now you know why and what made her that way and how her horrible, horrible parents did not raise her into being the strong person that her sisters were until she figured out how to get there herself, which is the second 2/3 of the book. And it is so good. If you've got any Jane Austen fans in your life, this is a must. It came out in March, so I think it kind of went pandemic. It really deserves a read.
Yeah, terrific. Okay, for the readers in the audience, I'll put those links to those two in the show notes so people can check those out. Okay, let's wrap up. I have one final question for you. If you could say one thing to parents about becoming happier, what would you say to them? Any kind of parting thoughts?
Any parting thoughts? You don't have to be happy. You're just looking for ways to make your day-to-day life more pleasant. So the goal is happier. So if you find one pain point today, one thing that you really dislike doing, one place where your kids are really frustrating you, and try to come up with one thing you could do to make that better and then stick to it, that'll help.
Yeah. Terrific. Okay, well, I think that's a great place to end. So my guest today is KJ Dell'Antonia, author of How to Be a Happier Parent and author of the new novel, The Chicken Sisters. So KJ, where can listeners find your books?
You can find the books anywhere. Absolutely anywhere books are sold. I highly encourage you to head to your independent bookseller and try to keep them alive. They will wrap it up and put it outside for you. I guarantee if you don't want to go inside, or you can go to bookshop.org where they will ship the books to you, and some of the money goes to the Independent Booksellers Association. But you can also get the books on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and in all the places.
Yeah. Okay. And what's your website?
KJDell'Antonia.com. And my most social media hangout is Instagram, where I am at KJDA.
Okay. Terrific. Well, KJ, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with KJ Dell'Antonia as much as I did. You can find show notes and all the links at widowedparentpodcast.com. Look for episode 92. And a shout out today to all my listeners in New Hampshire and Kansas in honor of today's guest. KJ currently lives in New Hampshire, and she grew up in Kansas, and the book, The Chicken Sisters, which just came out this week, takes place in Kansas. So if you are in New Hampshire or Kansas, welcome. I'm very glad you're here. And please do let me know about any grief programs or resources in your locations that I should know about. I've actually just added a new section to the resources page on my website. So if you go to jennylisk.com, JENNYLISK.com, and you go to the menu for resources, there is an item under that called Grief Support Programs and Resources. And I'd encourage everyone to go there and take a look and see what resources and programs are in your area. So on the page, it's broken down by location. There's menus for each of the states in the U.S. There are a few programs in Canada listed right now. And then there's another section for resources that are not particular to any given location. For example, a podcast or an online resource library, or there's actually a text-based grief support service called Grief Coach. I encourage you to check that one out too. So again, on my website, jennylisk.com, under resources, for Children's Grief Awareness Month, which has just ended, it was in November, I did a series of live stream interviews with these different people from these different programs or different resources, short 10-minute discussions featuring a program or a center in various locations, and I've put them on my website now. So if, for example, if you're in Oregon, you can look under Oregon, and you'll see that the Dougie Center is there, and if you click on that page, you see a description of their programs, and there's the video right there. It's about, 10-15 minutes long, talking about what they offer for people in the Portland area, and a link to their website and all those good things. And so you can look, if you're not in Oregon, you can check your state and see if there's something near you. Anyway, wherever you are, please tell the programs that you know about, that your family participates in, tell them about this. I'd love to interview them and add their resources to this listing as well, so that other listeners in lots of locations can find them. And actually, this is not just limited to the U.S., so please, I've interviewed 2 programs in Canada so far. I would love to talk to more, and also have quite a few listeners in the UK and Australia. So would love to talk to some programs in those locations, as well as any other places too. There's listeners in 50 some odd countries, I think. So if you know of a great resource, shoot me a note or tell them about my website, and I'd love to connect with them and do a short live interview. Okay, what else do we have this week? Oh, very exciting news I got last week. This is in the news about my memoir. It's called Future Widow, Losing My Husband, Saving My Family, and Finding My Voice. And it comes out on January 5th, so just a little over a month away. I got a proof copy in the mail last week. So the very first paperback copy, I'm holding it in my hands. It's a little strange. I started reading it last night, I felt like I should read it, and I, sat in my bed and opened it up. It's a little bit of a strange feeling, because normally when you open a book, you wonder what you're going to find in the pages. But of course, in this case, I opened it to page 1 and started reading, and I recognized every single word in there. So it's a little bit of a strange feeling reading your own book. But anyway, if you have not had a chance to pre-order it yet, if you're interested in the Kindle version, you can go to futurewidowbook.com, and there's a link there to pre-order the Kindle version, which will be delivered on January 5th. And the paperback and hardcover copies are not available for pre-order yet. They will be. But for now, if you're interested in paperback or hardcover, I'd encourage you to go to futurewidowbook.com. And you can request a free signed book plate, which I'll be sending out in January. And if you do that, I'll send you the book plate. Plus, I'll let you know just as soon as the paperback and hardcover are available to be ordered. So please do check that out. Okay, I hope you're having a great week wherever you are. And thank you, as always, for listening. And until next week, keep smiling.
Thank you for listening to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk. Connect with us on social media and at widowedparentpodcast.com.